In the late 1990s, designer Hiroshi Hasegawa designed the FM platform for Nissan that became the XVL show car and later the 2003 Infiniti G35 coupe and sedan. It also became the next generation 350Z and later 370Z for Nissan. This FM platform, which means front midship, really transformed and energized the Japanese sports car business in the years between 2000 and 2010.
Probably the single most common request we get, probably any Infiniti store in the country gets, is do you have any 03, 04, 05 G35 two-doors, we call them coupes, that are under $10,000? Well, the two-doors, they go for a lot of money wholesale, and it's very difficult for us to take one in and then do the reconditioning that needs to be done to meet our standards and still make money and still be under $10,000. But if you can find the right one under $10,000, it can be one of the best purchases you've ever made. And yes, you're probably gonna have to make some sacrifices, maybe taller miles or weird story on the Carfax. But if you know what you're looking for, an inexpensive G35 coupe can be an absolutely electrifying, thrilling car that can be essentially a trouble-free car, or at least as trouble-free as a high-performance sports car in this price point is ever going to be. Late in 2002, Automobile Magazine had a headline that featured the word shocker right across the top and had a red G35 two-door just like this one. It was the first car ever to pound for pound be just flat out better than anything from BMW. And no one had ever beaten BMW at their game before until this very car. And I would say as the years have gone by, that this particular car has actually not performed more admirably than anything from BMW, but performed more admirably by a lot.
Now, that VQ engine is really a dynamite engine. It goes anywhere from 260 horsepower to, in this case, 298 horsepower.
One of the things you'll read is that it has what's called a front midship platform, or a front mid-engine platform. And so you'll see it says right here, front midship. What that means is it's obviously not a mid-engine car. So why do they call it a mid-engine car? The engine itself sits so far back in the engine bay that the majority of the weight of the motor sits behind the front axle. So technically, that does make it a front mid-engine. And then it's got a primary and secondary firewall here. And then between those two, you'll discover that the battery is enclosed on the passenger side and that the brake assembly is enclosed on the driver's side. And the reason for all this, there's a couple of reasons. One, it allows for more crumple zones in the front. So in a serious accident, a lot more energy can be absorbed before you get to the engine, which is nice, but that's kind of a secondary reason. The primary reason is the weight distribution. Because the weight is so centralized in the G35 series, especially in the coupe, as soon as you're sitting in the car, it's about 51% of the weight is in the front, 49% is in the back. But when you go sit in the car, it's essentially a dead neutral 50-50 weight distribution. And so handling is amazing on these cars. You really can take it up to a pretty hairy limit around some pretty sophisticated turns that you wouldn't feel comfortable in a traditional 2004 vehicle. But this car will do things that just can't be done by other cars, including cars that are a lot more expensive than this. And if you've never driven a G35 and you're like, oh man, I've driven everything, they can't possibly compare against whatever it is that I'm accustomed to, I'm here to tell you this is the class act of this category. The G35 two-door is really one of the best sports cars of this entire generation. And so there's no timing belt in the engine. It's all chain driven, and so the timing chain doesn't get replaced. So when you buy these secondhand, one of the concerns with a lot of other Japanese cars is you have that expensive timing belt service. Not the case with the Infiniti, all chain driven. So you still have your 30,000 mile incremental services, and you know if you're buying one from an Infiniti dealer, they've either recently been done or just been done, as is the case with this one. So really, really nice and clean throughout the interior of the engine compartment. As you may know or may not know if you're new to looking at Infinitis, Infiniti as a brand does not report to Carfax, and so it can be a real adventure, especially on older cars that could have really been dragged through the mud a little bit in their life. It's hard to know without having the actual service records from an Infiniti dealer. The flip side to that is, because we're on this intranet that doesn't project out to the outside world, you don't see the information that we see, but you can call any Infiniti store in the country and get all the records going back to day one on any Infiniti, even if it's never been to their dealership before, even if it's on the other side of the country. A dealership in Florida can pull the records to this car going back to day one, even though the car's up here in the Seattle area. But when you're looking at cars, if you don't have access to a friend at an Infiniti dealer who will provide you with the information that you're looking for, all you need to do is, especially on the front end of the car, you always look inside this area right in here. You notice how the paint is always really dull on the engine compartment itself, but really glossy on the outside. And so this is the recipe for success if you're looking at a car that you're planning on buying for yourself. Always want it shiny on the outside, always want it dull on the inside. They don't put clear coat on the interior of the engine compartment, so it's always just really dull, which is good. If you see one that's really shiny on the inside, that's actually bad. It means it's been in an accident. And so these screws, because there's not much paint on here, these screws scratch really easily. So if you see that one of these screws has been chewed up a little bit, it's for sure that it's been in an accident. Same with the passenger side. In fact, you can go all the way around the car. The interior components are never that shiny. And so as a result, these screws, if you ever see them turn, you know that that part's been hit. We don't use VIN stickers like some of the other brands do, so it takes a little bit more of a sophisticated eye to see if one's been in an accident or not. But honestly, it's not that big a deal if you know what you're looking for. Now this car is a popular color combination. Some cars are more colors are more popular than others. The whites and blacks and grays tend to be more popular. The blues and the reds tend to be less popular. And then also sports package cars for resale value tend to be the most popular. Options like navigation, although cool when the car is new, not that big of a deal. This car is almost a 10-year-old car, and so the technology is hopelessly out of date by this point. Anyway, now one thing I do want to look at is the tires. The tires are Kumos in the front, and then I see these wheels are a little chewed up. Wheels, again, I'm not going to get too concerned about these wheels. Any car that's older, especially with wheels that kind of protrude out like this, is going to have some scratches. If I'm just dying to have a car with no scratches on the wheel, it's about $125 to refinish the wheel, and it looks good as new. But those Kumos on the front are partnered up with Federal tires on the back, and Federal tires are like super bottom feeder. And the tires, because this is a rear-wheel drive car, and a high-performance rear-wheel drive car at that, are taking an inordinate amount of wear and tear. And so if I'm going to have the better of the two as far as price goes, tires, I want the more expensive tire on the back, not on the front. And so at least they're fairly new. I mean, I'll get some life span out of them, but these are really a cheesy brand of tire. If I look at the driver's seat here, now this one's all chewed up right here. They're all chewed up right there. Don't trip about that. Any interior repair guy can do one of two things. Either they can mask this with some vinyl and it'll actually look pretty nice. Some go the extra mile and then they'll take this entire panel off and then put a new panel on. This as a fix, probably about $60 or $70. Taking this panel off, probably about $100. My suggestion is spend about $200 and get somebody who knows what they're doing. And what they do is they take this panel off and they fill it with Brillo pads, and then it becomes stiff and just like brand new, and then it'll last forever and ever and you don't have to worry about it. Now, one thing I'm going to look for, because I'm already on alert because the car is an older car with 130-odd thousand miles, that I'm just certain some bad thing has happened to it in its life. But now that I know that it says on the Carfax that there's damage disclosure, well then I just want to find out where it is. But that same rule that I told you about in the front, where you're looking to see for the flat finish in here and the shiny finish out here, well, it actually is still the same. There's no repaint in this entire area. And then what I said is whatever one concept is on one side, it needs to be the same concept on the other side. And here's where I'm spotting a difference, is that this weld right here has a particular, almost like a long rectangular concept. It might be spot welds, it might be kind of puttied up. Whatever it is, there's a million ways to weld something together. They just need to be the same on both sides. If I look at this side right here, it's the kind of mix and match. This line's not straight, this has some brushings in here, And so I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that one of these two fenders was worked on, either this one or this one. And then I look at these screws right here, and that same thing I was saying to worry about with the screws looking all chewed up, these screws are all chewed up. And so I know for sure that this left fender was compromised in some way, shape, or form. Now, if I'm going to get in a car accident, I'd rather it be in the back than in the front or the sides. If it's in the sides, then you know the airbag's deployed. If it's in the front, you know the airbag's deployed. Plus, in the front, it shakes the engine and transmission, and you don't know what happened there and what the long-term ramifications are. If it gets hit in the back, I mean, I'd rather a car not be hit, but if it's going to get hit, there's really nothing back here to really screw up. However, one thing you want to do is just smell the trunk. And the reason is there's a distinctive mold smell that'll never go away. If this is leaking, like this tail light was compromised in such a way that water just for years has been getting in here, it'll just smell horrible and you'll never get that smell out. So long as it smells fresh and normal, you're in pretty good shape. Also, I want to look and see that there's a spare tire, that there's tools, and that everything looks the way I'm expecting this car to look. And everything looks pretty decent. So whatever happened, yeah, it's been in an accident, but probably not the end of the world. The other thing is that whenever you get a sports package, it has this spoiler. You want to make sure, if at all possible, that the spoiler, if it was added after the fact, was added by an Infiniti dealer. The reason is everybody likes the look of spoilers, but there's a third brake light here and there's a third brake light here. When you add a spoiler after the fact, you have to reroute the wiring from this brake light to this brake light. And if somebody wants to do it, some weekend warrior in their garage, they always screw this up and it'll cause you all kinds of problems forever and ever. It's such a big deal on these G35 coupes that if somebody added a spoiler aftermarket and disconnected these wires and ran them through here, honestly, I wouldn't even buy the car. It's that big of a deal. I've seen too many customers have too many major problems, the result of this rewiring that they can just never seem to rectify, and it causes problems well above and beyond the lights and the brake lights and what have you. But this one was factory installed, so everything looks just fine. I think that this car's had some paint work. In fact, I don't have to think. I know for certain that it has. And so I can see little fisheyes and what have you, and maybe a refinishing of the clear coat. It doesn't look bad, but it's just something that you notice. For a 2003, I'll be honest, this car looks fantastic. All the power seat functions work great. Nothing sounds tired or old. Glove box opens nicely. There's actually two glove boxes in a G Series coupe. The one other thing that it's worth noting in 2003, there's a neat safety advance on G Series cars that nothing else had back in 2003, and that is active head restraints. And so if you're ever rear-ended in a G35 coupe or any Infiniti sold in 2003, the headrests actually pop up and come forward. So if you're rear-ended, the headrest comes and gets you rather than your head snapping against it to prevent whiplash. I'll jump inside. Let's take a look inside. Now, this has airbags built into the chairs. A lot of cars in this generation had airbags built into the doors, and that's really something that you don't want. The airbags there would be coming at you rather than moving away from you. In a perfect world, front airbags, you don't have a choice, but you'd rather have fewer airbags coming at your body and more of them going away from your body. And so chair airbags are better. Also, if your passenger's napping and they're reclined in the back seat, they're too far away to benefit from the airbag if you're sideswiped. Or if weather's really bad and you're close to the steering wheel, those door airbags can be too far behind you. This one also has curtain airbags, so it has airbags in the front, airbags in the side, and curtain airbags. It has anti-lock brakes. It has every safety advance that was available on the market back in 2003. One of the things you need to know about a 6-speed transmission, though, is that the 6-speed transmissions go through clutches. And they go through clutches, depending on your driving style, between 70,000 miles and about 150,000 miles. Some knucklehead who doesn't know how to drive, the clutch could go out tomorrow. I mean, if you're frying the clutch with every single shift, then it could go out at any old time. But historically, we've seen clutches on the low end 70, on the high end 150, 160. The problem with clutches is if you've replaced a clutch in your Civic, you know that your neighborhood car fixer place has a special going on every Sunday for about $300 to replace the clutch. Not the case on the G35. 6-speed clutch replacements on G35s is about $2 grand. And that's even if you go to an independent shop. The clutch itself is really expensive. It's a very complicated process, and it's $2 grand. And you just need to factor that into your equation. If you're buying a car with its original clutch and it's got 50, 60, 80,000 miles, you have to put that number $2,000 in your head and say, I'm going to be on the hook for that expense at some point. The other thing is the services. 90K service, a premier service is about $1,000. You can do it halfway for about $500. There is no timing belt in these cars. It's all chain driven, so at least you have the benefit of that. But you still need to replace the water pump. You still need to replace the spark plugs. They're platinum tip. They're expensive, and so you still need to get that done. I mentioned on the Carfax how this car could have 1 million service records, and you'd never know it by looking at the Carfax at about 50 or 60% of the Infiniti stores in the country, including ours. All you need to do is call any Infiniti store. It doesn't matter if you live in Timbuktu and you call a dealership 5 states away. It doesn't matter. You call them up and say, can you pull the service history for this car and fax it to me? And if you say it in your friendliest voice, they will do it for you and just fax it to wherever you are. And you can get every single service record going back to day one. And more significantly, you get the actual comments made by the technician when they were doing those services. I recommended this, this, and this, and they said no, no, no. I noticed that there were rat infestation in their engine area and it was chewing all the wires, and they said they were going to trade it in. I noticed that the airbag wasn't working and they told me just to unplug it. And so you see things that you would never, ever, ever see in any other format. And so getting those service records on Infinitis is worth its weight in gold, especially if you're on a budget looking for something under 10 grand, but still has the sexy look that you're proud to show up in. I'm going to turn this car on. And so you hear a little belt noise there just at the initial startup. And so again, if you're naturally paranoid about cars and you just think every dealer's out there or private party's out there to shyster you and pull one over on you, belt noise, honestly, not that big a deal. Belts are pretty inexpensive to replace, and you can just spray some silicone. People always say spray WD-40. You don't spray WD-40 on your belts. You do spray silicone on your belts, and you can get silicone at the auto parts store for nothing. You just keep a bottle in your garage and spray some of that on there, and you're good as new. If the sound keeps coming back over and over, just replace the belt. And again, belts aren't that expensive on Infinitis like most Japanese cars. I'm going to rev it up just a little bit. Now, of course, there's no substitute for actually driving a car, but just sitting here in the car, turning it on, starts up okay, sounds okay, there's no check engine light on. That's a big one that you need to be conscientious of, is the check engine light. People always say on Japanese cars, and most of the time they're right, is that it's just the gas cap or an O2 sensor or something like that. But if you're buying a car, especially if you're buying a car as is, there's something on the dashboard that says check the engine. You need to check the engine, and so you need to take it to a qualified mechanic who knows exactly what that code's all about. A lot of times somebody will say, oh, my buddy has one of those things that reads what the code is. Don't bring your buddy with the code that reads things. Take it to an actual Infiniti dealer and they will pull it for you and they will tell you exactly what's going on. The Infiniti dealer is not there to screw you over, even if you're buying a car private party. The service department is totally different from the sales department, any dealership in the world. They're there to have their own relationship with you, and they hope they win you over enough that you'll consider doing your oil changes and such at their dealership. So they'll take good care of you. It's $129 to get a buyer's inspection on a car, as far as $129 you'll ever spend. But in lieu of that, if you don't want to spend the $129 and you just want to go for it, the other thing you want to do for sure is bring a bunch of CDs that you don't like and check the CD changer, because they're all bad. Every single one of them, they all need to be replaced from 03 until 07 in the coupe. And it's this Bose setup that they have, and it just eats CDs. I put about 20,000 miles on my car in 4 years, and I had to replace the CD changer 2 times. And so it eats the CDs. There's no getting the CDs out, and you actually have to send the unit back to the factory if it's under warranty. This car's not under warranty, so you have to send it to a repair shop. It's about $800, and a lot of the wiring and stuff, it's essential that this unit be stock. And so if you do decide to take the stereo out and put in like a Car Toys type of stereo, make sure their best guy's working on it and totally knows what's going on, because it's easy to mess up an Infiniti. All of a sudden your lights stop working inside, or all of a sudden one of your gauges stops working or something like that. It's easy to make a mistake putting in an aftermarket radio. Same with aftermarket alarms. I try and steer clear of anything with an aftermarket alarm unless I know for sure that it was installed by somebody who knows what they're doing, because again, you have a million electrical problems as a result of poorly installed aftermarket equipment. Alarms are kind of the worst offender. But again, this car is 136,000 miles with a bad Carfax. Is probably about a $9,000 car. Sport package with a wing, cool colors. Actually has pretty decent service records. It looks good. It drives nice. I mean, I've had a chance to drive this car. This is actually for somebody who wants to make a really intelligent buy. This car is worth $6 or $7 grand for 3 or 4 years. You could drive a cool car that's a fast car for a couple of grand over a few years. You got to be kidding me. It's the smartest money you'll ever spend in a car. So long as you don't make a mistake and buy one that immediately needs a bunch of work. It's got bad brakes, bad tires, it just drives crummy, it's got a multitude of problems, they neglected every service. Now you're on the hook for all that stuff. But if all that stuff's on point, again, for 9 grand, I don't care if it's got stupid Carfax, it's 9 grand. I don't care if it's got 136 clicks. If the car drives great, it drives great. If the price is right and the look is right and the performance is right, you've picked a winner.
But it's a cool car, it's a fascinating car, it's a fast car, but more importantly, it's a loud car that's a blast to drive. So let's crank it on and see what it'll do.